place outside the waking world, where children go while they sleep. Wander the dreamkin, lost sleepers, whose souls this land seeks to keep. Underneath the gentle waves of lucid seas we fell, we're off to find our missing friends in the vast Dreamwell.
Dreamwell is a competitive abstract strategy game for 2 to 4 players designed by Nick Little, featuring the art of Tara McPherson, and published by Action Phase and Indie Boards and Cards. In Dreamwell, players are trying to locate friends who have been lost in the vast and strange world of the Dreamwell itself. This 4x4 grid of tiles represents the Dreamwell itself. Each tile contains an environment, or the background, so you have an underwater, kind of a deserty, more of a space theme with a rainbow on it, as well as a cute and adorable yet strange creature from the Dreamwell itself. Taking a closer look at one of these tiles, you will also notice that on the sides here you have little doorways, and this indicates the direction that your player pawn can move to get from tile to tile. So in this case of this tile here, my player pawn can move up here, or could move to the right and jump over to this tile as well. From this tile, I can move diagonally, either here or here. So you have doorways that distinguish which direction you are allowed to move. During the setup, each player is given a token to represent which color they're going to be in the game. They're also given 2 cardboard standees that match their player color. And this player pawn here, regardless of color, his name is Mr. Wiggles according to the rule book, and I just think that's absolutely adorable. You also deal each player 2 cards. Now these cards are kept separate, or kept secret from the other players. These cards indicate the friends that you're trying to locate inside the Dreamwell, as well as the 2 creatures and the environment, or the background, that you need to find within the Dreamwell in order to locate this friend. Once a friend is located, this card gets played in front of you on the table. You score the indicated number of points at the end of the game, and there's usually some kind of special ability. In this case, this card says that I have located this spacey lightning background. So this background that's on this card, I've already located that. This card gives me 1 point, and for each turn I can perform a move action for free. So that is the basic setup, really simple there. Also, when setting up the game, you will deal out 4 face-up friend cards. This forms what is referred to in the game as the display. And then you'll set the deck of face-down cards that contain the other Dreamwell cards, the other friend cards, will be placed so that this display can be refilled. On their turn, a player takes 3 actions, such as possibly moving a token, flipping a tile or rotating a tile, drawing a card from the friend deck or from the display of face-up cards, replacing the display by moving all 4 cards out and drawing 4 new ones, or once they've located a friend, they can play a card out of their hand in order to score those points. Now let's take a look at each of these actions individually. The first action available to a player is to move a pawn. At the start of the game, each player starts off the board, and for your first move action, you can move a pawn to any tile of the Dreamwell that is on the outside edge of the 4x4 grid. So any one of those tiles can be moved onto. So I could start here on the little whale. Now, if I move my tile onto a tile that has a door facing the outside edge, I then get to move another tile for free without spending a second move action. So that's one way that you can move. Now, of course, you could use so that would be one action. I could take a second action here. And of course, if I already have one on the board, I can move through to another tile. Now, when moving, it's important to note that, for example, with this representation of Mr. Wiggles here, on this tile, he has 2 directions he can move. He can move to the left over to here, and he can move, according to this door, he can move to the right over to this tile. He cannot move back here, he can't move up, and there are no doors in the diagonal or the corners of this tile, so he cannot move diagonal. So he can go to the left, he can go to the right for a move action. Those doors indicate where he is allowed to move. Now, if at any time, let's say I do move him to the left, because I have these 2 doors that are lined up, I can take a second move action for free through another door. And again, because these are lined up, I can now take another action for free. So I could move in one move action, I could move from here all the way up to here with a single action and still have 2 actions remaining. That brings us to our second action that is available to you, rotating a tile. When moving, as long as you line up doors, you can always take free move actions. You always get one move action that you can take from one door or off of one tile using the door. If you line up the doors, you can take extra move actions. So it becomes very effective to rotate these tiles to try to line up the doors. Now, when you rotate a tile, I could rotate this tile 90 degrees. I could rotate it 180 degrees, or I could rotate it a full 270 degrees as well, just depending on how I want to do that. And no matter whether I rotate 90, 180, or 270 degrees, the rotation of that tile is a single move action. So, for example, I could rotate the tile in this manner so that now with my move action, I can go here and set that up and then be able to take another move action to move up because I did have a lined up door. I could get all the way up to the upper corner from down here. So very easy, very simple way of moving around the board quickly by rotating tiles. And that is where a lot of the strategy in the game comes in, from rotating the tiles in order to line up the doorway so that you can move around the board fairly quickly and find the environments and creatures that you need in order to locate your friends. One important note when rotating tiles is that you can rotate any tile on the board that is either unoccupied, so any of these tiles that don't have anything on them. I can also rotate any of the tiles that my Mr. Wiggles characters are currently occupying, so I can rotate my own tiles. The only tiles I am not allowed to rotate during gameplay are those occupied by an opponent's Mr. Wiggles. So in this particular example, I would not be allowed to rotate this tile because one of my opponents is currently there. The third action available to a player is to draw a card. Now, a player can draw a card either from one of the 4 displayed cards that are showing in the display, and if they do decide to take that card and draw that card to add it to their hand, that card is immediately replaced from the deck. Alternatively, a player could also select to just take the top card from the deck, not knowing what they're going to draw if they don't need or want to pick up any of the cards that are currently on display. Drawing cards allows you to add additional friends to your hand, more friends to locate, more points to score. And this is the only way to add additional friends, so as you're finding friends and playing cards from your hand, you will eventually have to begin drawing cards again from the deck so that you can find more friends, because you only begin the game with 2 cards or 2 friends in your hand that you can locate, but you need to find 7 to trigger game end. The fourth action available to a player is to replace the display. That simply means taking the 4 cards on display, placing them back on the bottom of the deck, and drawing 4 new cards to pull out. So this can definitely give a player more options in order to choose from when they're looking for additional friends to find. The fifth and final action that a player can take is to find one of their friends in the Dreamwell by playing a card from their hand. Now, to locate a friend in the Dreamwell, we'll take a look at this card, for example. To locate my friend here and her pet cat or wolf or fox or whatever that is supposed to be, it's gorgeously illustrated here, I need to locate these 2 creatures as well as the background or the environment that those creatures are residing in. So I need to find all 3. Now, I only have 2 Mr. Wiggles, which means one of my Mr. Wiggles cards needs to have found one of these creatures in the specified environment. So if I look at the board, I go back to the board and I look at my green Mr. Wiggles characters here, I see that I have located this particular background as well as this 3-eyed creature. Also, my other pawn, my other Mr. Wiggles representation, is up here on this creature, also located on the card. So I could play this card in front of me, which will score me a point at the end of the game, and now each turn I can do an additional move action for free. Once a player has taken his 3 actions, play will continue to the player to the left, and will continue around the table until one player has located 7 friends in the Dreamwell. That then triggers the end scoring. Players will total up the number of points on all of the dreams they have located in the Dreamwell, and the person with the highest score is declared the winner. Let's look at an example turn. In this case, I am the second player. The first player has already made his 3 moves and has moved his 2 Mr. Wiggles pawns onto the board to set up his future turn. On my first turn, I take a look at the cards in my hand, the creatures and environments that I need to find, or I need to locate in order to locate my missing friends here. And I see that in 3 moves, I can get my pawn where I need it to be. So for my first move, I will take my first Mr. Wiggles character and I'll move him on the board here. And because I moved in where the door is pointing to the outside of the board, I can take an extra move action. So we'll move him up here. For my second player move, I'm going to just move this pawn up here. Now I could, because there is a door pointing at the outside of the board, I could choose to take a third action or an extra move action, but instead I'm going to use my third action to simply move my player pawn here. And again, I have a door that the doors were lined up, so I could have taken an extra action to move up here, but because I have this card in my hand that locates the night sky or the lightning sky, the three-eyed little blue beast, and the little panda bear with a heart on its chest, I've located this friend, so I can play this card down. I've now scored 1 point, and I now get to do a move action for free on each turn. Once a player has located 7 friends in the Dreamwell, the game ends. You total up points based on each card that each player has played on the table. So in this case, I would have 7 cards to score. My opponents could have 2, 3, or 4. But you only score points for what you've played on the table based on the friends that you were able to find before the game ended, and the player with the highest point total is declared the winner. There are various ways to score points. You can simply score points based on a point total showing on the card. This particular card will give me 1 point for each card that I have played of my 7 cards that has this friend on it. I will get 1 point for each one. This card, similarly, will give me 1 point plus 1 point for each card I have with this background, or this particular background. This card will give me 7 points if I've played 3 cards that have this friend on it. This card will give me 2 points for every pair I have of these 2 friends. And finally, I can score 1 point for a wild, and the wild lets me pick a friend or a background or a scenery and score 1 point for each card that I have with that friend or that background. And this card still counts as having this background and this friend on it for scoring other cards. Once you've mastered the regular version of Dreamwell, there is an advanced version where some changes to setup occur. First, all of the tiles have a light side. You see the light border going around the environment here is white. But on the back side of this tile, that border is black. In the advanced version of Dreamwell, you set up your 4x4 grid so that 8 of the tiles have this white background around them, as all 16 of them do now, and the other 8 tiles will be made up of the black border. So it's going to give you some advanced tiles there, some different environments to find. You will also, when setting up the deck of friend cards, there are friend cards that have a black border instead of a white border. Those will be shuffled into the deck as well. When playing the advanced version of Dreamwell, you also have access to a 6th action, which is to flip a tile. When flipping a tile, you can flip any unoccupied tile, so you can't be there and an opponent cannot be there. And when you flip a tile, you do exactly what it says. If I wanted to flip this tile, I simply flip it to its other side, making sure the doors still face the same direction they did before I flipped it. And now I have a new tile with a new environment. What is really neat about the way this is set up is I know from looking at this tile that on the other side of this tile is, as I have a pink whale here, the pink elephant is on the back side of this tile. And I also know, based on the color of this exterior border here, not the white around it, but the color where the doors are residing, I know that when I flip this tile, I'm going to have a pink elephant that is in this blue kind of watery environment. So we flip that over, and there it is, and the blue watery environment with my pink elephant. So there is a way and some strategy by looking at the exterior colors and the color of the creatures on each tile to know what is on the other side of the tile before you flip it. One other variant to Dreamwell is to introduce the Nightmare. At the start of the game, when playing with the Nightmare variant, the person that is to the right of the first player will place the Nightmare on one of the 4 interior tiles. Then, after a player takes their movement, their regular actions, that player must move the Nightmare 1 tile. And the Nightmare must travel by door, so it can only move here or here in this case. And the Nightmare does not take extra movement if doors are aligned. So if I were to move the Nightmare to here, she would stay there. Now in this case, because the Nightmare moved into the tile where my green Mr. Wiggles is, Mr. Wiggles is scared out of the Dreamwell and is removed from the board and will have to be moved back on at the beginning of my next turn. So the Nightmare variant adds some additional difficulty, some additional complexity and strategy to the game, and a little bit of take that, if you will, where players can now directly affect one another as opposed to just traveling through the Dreamwell, kind of on your own, looking for your own friends while your opponents are doing the same. With the introduction of the Nightmare variant, now you can move the Nightmare onto another tile. When the Nightmare is on a tile, a player cannot move to that tile because the Nightmare is terrifying. And as I just demonstrated, if the Nightmare moves into a tile occupied by a player standee, that player's standee is scared out of the Dreamwell and is removed from the 4x4 grid until it can be played on that player's next turn. Also, with the Nightmare on a tile, that tile cannot be rotated or flipped. So again, it's a good way to not only send your opponents off the board, but also hinder their plans to rotate, flip tiles, or even move to those tiles. Now, I briefly mentioned as we were walking through the steps and looking at tiles and art on the cards, that each friend in the Dreamwell that you're looking for has a name. Each creature has a name, and each environment also has a name. So when we're looking at our friends, we're looking for Ace, Ion, Stella and Flux, Astra and Orbit, Lucius, Orion, and Callisto, or as I like to call him, Gene Simmons Panda Bear. You also have Gamma the Elephant, Cosmo the Whale, and you can tell that they're related on the backs of the tiles by this arrow. You've got Jupiter the Bunny, Lil Hero, who is our little three-eyed adorable friend. He's probably my favorite creature throughout the game. I just love the look there. You've got Nova the Black Swan, and Umi Bozu, which is kind of fun to say. And then you have Borealis, cool name. I may have to name a dog Borealis sometime. And Skullflower. And you can see the relation. If you see Skullflower on a tile, Borealis is on the back. And the same with the other paired creatures here. And then for the environments, we have Pink Space, Blue Water, Black Sky, Green Cave. That is Dreamwell. What do I think? Let's go find out. So that's Dreamwell, a fantastic little abstract game, simple for kids to play, especially if you don't put either variant in it, just play the basic version of the game without any nightmares or without any of the advanced tiles or advanced friend cards that are there. Very simple for little kids to pick up. I highly recommend checking this out. Obviously, the artwork, Tara McPherson did a fantastic job capturing a very dreamlike feel, a very adorable and cute world, cute creatures, very well colored, like the little light, soft kind of neon colors that are there. So definitely check this one out, and until next week, I'm the Chubby Meeple.